Hello there, I'm Geraldine Doogue. I present Saturday Extra on Saturday mornings on RN, and Tom presents
G'day, thanks so much for being here.
Between the Lines. And we both cover stories about Australia outside the world, as it were, in the world, beyond our particular shores. And we're fascinated today by the US election. And I'm going to say it's races, isn't it, Tom? It's not one race. Like, we're talking about the presidential election, obviously, and we welcome all your particular questions. But when you look at it, it's not just the big race, is it?
That's right.
It's lots of races. And in fact, those, quotes, lesser races, I think, are becoming, frankly, more interesting.
Well, that's right, because the overwhelming consensus is that Trump will lose pretty badly. And the question now is, will the Republicans hold Congress?
Well, what's your estimate?
I think the prevailing wisdom is they'll lose the Senate, but they might hold on to the House. But if it's a really bad landslide for the Republicans, then you can't help but think that there'll be some repercussions for the House majority.
And so, you're a great observer of the US over many, many years. What difference would it make to a Hillary presidency if the Democrats did win the Senate?
Well, if they win the Senate and the House, it just means that the Liberal Democrats will be able to regulate and legislate in a more liberal direction. Now, bear in mind, Barack Obama, after his landslide election victory in 2008, also had the Democrats controlling both the House and the Senate, but he still struggled to get legislation through because many Democrats opposed his legislation, particularly on the environment. But the centre of gravity in the Democratic Party has shifted to the left in recent times, so you're more likely to get more left liberal legislation through the Congress.
Yes, I must say, I find the Senate, because I think the reps, if they got the reps, that'd
Well,
be 30
that's right.
seats. That'd be
That's
quite
30
remote.
seats, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
30, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But there's 4 in the Senate, and I've just done an interview for Saturday Extra, because what we're doing, we're calling it American Election Express, and we're going to editors in different small places around the US, because I sort of feel like everyone will see what questions people say over the next 20 minutes or so. But I think everyone's heard a lot of this repetitive stuff, about the big, and really it's the small
Great
places that are going to the granular places, and so we've actually just interviewed the head of the Gainesville Sun in Florida, which is a big, well, Hillary's got to win Florida to win, and New Hampshire, where it's an amazing race, the most expensive race in New Hampshire history. And, in a way, they are genuine races. I don't think the main one any longer is a genuine race.
Well, of course, a lot depends on whether Hillary and the Democrats can win traditional Republican states. I mean, the current polling trajectory indicates that the Democrats might win solid red Republican states like
Utah
and Arizona,
who haven't voted
Georgia.
since Johnson.
That's right, in the
Yes.
60s. So, look, this could be a profound tidal wave for the Democrats. It's really on the cards, particularly in light of Donald Trump's exceedingly erratic and, frankly, unhinged behaviour.
Yes, for someone, I've always been a bit more ambivalent about the US model than, say, you have. So having gone to quite a lot of sort of discussions over the years, I just put my glasses on so I can actually read some of your questions. I think there's been a profound lack of interest in what we'd call the mob and the battlers from the people who are powerful, much, much more than Australia, because we have compulsory voting.
That's
so
right.
people who aspire to power and influence have to take the mob seriously.
Absolutely.
It's very different in the US, and I actually feel it's been heading to this for a while, and people haven't realised it, but I don't know whether that's
Well, I think it's true,
arch.
Geraldine, that if there were compulsory voting in the United States, this election would never have been in doubt. Hillary Clinton would have won right from the outset. But low turnout elections help someone like Donald Trump because he's motivating folks who don't usually vote. And if he can find a way of appealing to these folks while at the same time depressing his rivals' coalition-based turnout, then he has a decent chance of winning. But the game's changed in the last 2 weeks. It seems like ever since the Washington Post broke that story about that lewd conversation Donald Trump had about women, very degrading comments. And then the aftermath, I think it's now 13 women who have now come out accusing him of sexual harassment. That's going to be hard to recover from. And you get the sense his campaign's in freefall, so he probably won't win now. But if he was a better candidate, he'd have a decent chance. precisely because of the voluntary voting system.
Yes, I mean, I actually was reading. They've got 142 million people are actually registered to vote, but there's 219 million potential voters.
There you go.
So that tells you a lot, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And it's all about motivating people. And Trump has done a very good job of motivating his base. Whereas Hillary's base, the left of the Democratic Party, they're very unsure about her because she's seen as a creature of Wall Street and too close to the Washington establishment, the Bernie Sanders supporters. So Trump's base helps him more than it helps Hillary. But again, to win elections, you need to appeal to independents and minorities and college-educated people, women and moderate Republicans, and Trump's losing those folks.
Just before we go to our first question, that Gary Johnson is a Libertarian candidate. He's actually polling quite well. I mean, I realise he's small, but gee, I've been surprised actually how he's polling.
Geraldine, do you think he takes more votes away from Hillary or from Trump?
Oh, Hillary for sure, don't you think?
Well, Libertarians tend to be more centre-right types.
Yes, but
it's hard to. But on social issues, they're more liberal.
Yeah, you could be right.
It's complicated.
So it could be. Now, Peter has commented that the mainstream media and polling is ignoring Trump support, and that he's actually in the lead. I mean, is there any truth to this type of claim?
Well, there's no question, I think, Geraldine, that the mainstream media in the United States, particularly the major papers like the Washington Post and the New York Times, are overwhelmingly critical of Donald Trump. Very rarely will you see an op-ed piece or an editorial that's in any way, shape or form sympathetic to Donald Trump. And this just reaffirms those widespread doubts among Trump supporters that the media is in cahoots with Hillary Clinton. Now, I think you could make the argument that the reason why the Post and the Times are against Trump, it's not just because they're liberal newspapers, but they think that Trump upsets the sensibilities of a significant segment of Americans. Look, the polling data seems to be pretty clear. I mean, if Hillary Clinton has a 10-point polling lead, it's hard to see how that's not reflecting middle America. So I think the argument that the polls don't reflect what's happening on the ground doesn't stand up. Now, if it was a closer poll lead, I think that argument may have some merit. And we can't discount the possibility that a lot of Trump supporters are shy Trump supporters. They might tell pollsters one thing,
sure,
but in privacy, when they go into the polling booth, they make a different assessment.
But I would say back to you, Peter, that my estimate is that early part of the campaign where Trump got the most absurd level of actual support and interest from the mainstream media. The argument is he spent almost no money on his campaign. It was really done by he got all this free publicity. So I actually think there was a sort of almost an obsession with covering him.
That was the argument made by Media Watch recently, I think, too.
Was it?
Yeah, their argument on Media Watch was that the media are responsible for the rise of Donald Trump. I just think I disagree with both of you, Geraldine. I think the media, by and large, were very critical of Trump from the outset. Now, they did give him a lot of oxygen precisely because he said so many provocative things.
Yes, but I suppose, it raises so many issues. Like, if you were the New York Times and you had a man like Trump, Obama's rhetoric, I think, of late has been absolutely brilliant. He said, family values, if the Republicans say there are family values, do they actually look at Trump way back? Actually, it is amazing if you bother to read the things going right back to when he owned the Miss Universe title, as it were, template. He used to walk in regularly to people undressed and obviously enjoyed the looking. Now, I would argue that if you were a paper of record like the New York Times, which almost embodied the dignity of America, what do you do with a man like that? Do you just treat him as like one hand and on the other?
He has been a larger-than-life figure in American public discourse for the best part of 3 decades.
We do know a lot about him,
yeah,
actually.
So when a prominent reality television star, a prominent casino real estate magnate runs for office and he says provocative things and he's getting support, I think it is important for the media to cover it.
Yeah, but I think you can cover it with comment. That's what I'm saying. I think that the notion that you have to stay sort of absolutely ruthlessly even if someone's you wouldn't do it if someone was proposing racism, proposing it, you'd say no, beyond the pale. Yeah. Well, Gee whiz, I think there's a heck of a lot here from
I
him.
think, to be fair, the New York Times and the and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, their news pages have been exceedingly fair. You're saying that the news pages should have been more opinionated against Trump from the outset.
I'm not worried by the fact, that's what I'm saying, I'm not worried by the allegation that the newspapers haven't been entirely fair to Trump. Like, I think everybody's getting themselves in a knot about that.
Yes.
And I noticed even the coverage this morning in the Fin Review by Simon Jackman, who's, I think, your colleague, who I've got a lot of time for. He put an incredible amount of time in his page discussing how Trump behaved at the debate, very little about Hillary.
Yes.
And I thought, this is an interesting sort of effort to make sure you're not accused of bias.
Yes. Well, I mean, really, the reality is one of the main reasons why the debates have been so popular is because of Donald Trump. It's not so much because of Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is just such an unconventional candidate in so many respects. He attracts people from a wide variety of ideological and political beliefs. It's a reality television brought to American politics, isn't it?
Yes.
Which you could say is a very bad thing, but nevertheless, that's the reality.
Now, Malcolm's asked, will America ever be able to reduce the influence of big money in their political system? And is Australia going to continue down the same path? So I've got my thoughts. What are yours, Tom?
Well, look, if you go down the path of regulation, and there have been Supreme Court challenges on this question, then it does, according to some legal jurists, reflect infringements on people's free speech and their freedom to contribute as they see fit. The intriguing thing about this campaign is that the Democrats are spending far more money than the Republicans. Usually the Republicans will be even Stevens up until the Obama era, but the Democrats have been outspending Donald Trump big time. And this, according to Donald Trump, just reaffirms his argument that the system is rigged, that big money, Wall Street, big business are in cahoots with the Democrats. And he, bear in mind, a multi-billionaire, is the friend of the little guy railing against the system.
Ha, ha, ha.
But it's resonating for some folks.
It is for some, and we might get to that. It appears to be resonating for less educated, older white people. That's what, and that's the whole debate around whether the Rust Belt of America, the famous Rust Belt states,
but what about money in
versus
politics?
the Sun Belt?
What about money?
I mean, money in politics. I think America has just got a major problem with this, and I think it's wrecking their democracy. I mean, I think Paul Kelly from Our Australian, who wrote a very good piece last week, who's an incredibly pro-America man, said this is the decline of America. This is not the apogee of American democracy. It's the decline of America. How can anybody take it fully seriously? This is so undignified. Now he's not even saying he'll respect the result of the election. So I think that one way and the other, the reformers have to get in there and pull back that big money, the assumption of big money, that it becomes it becomes like reality TV.
But Donald Trump really rose in the political scene over the last 12 to 16 months by not spending a lot of money. He was just going on Twitter and getting free media. So how would you respond to that?
Well,
you still might get more Trumps with less money in the political system.
You might. We will see. I mean, look, my instinct is that this is actually not going to be but I could be so wrong, that this election will be a bookend of something rather than a beginning of something. I think a lot of Americans are so deeply embarrassed about it. Yeah. Americans who live here, Americans whom you meet, they just say, is this the advertisement we want to make of America? Sure. No, thank you. So, but I don't know, you watch America very closely.
Well, I think you're right. There are a lot of Americans who are embarrassed, but I think the real reality here is that there's a significant segment of Americans who are in a profoundly foul mood. They think their country's heading in the wrong direction under both parties, Obama and the Bushes. They think the country's heading in long-term decline. And in many respects, a lot of the folks who are attracted to Trump, they have real grievances, and he's tapping into them. You know, the white working class or lower middle class have experienced wage stagnation for the last generation or so.
40 years.
They've seen rising income inequality. This has been the most sluggish economic recovery since the Great Depression. They're sick and tired of seeing their country fight these unwinnable wars in the Middle East. They're sick of rampant political correctness. They genuinely believe, for good reason, that many politicians in Washington aren't representing their concerns. So this has been bubbling along for a while, and Trump, for all his rude and crude, lewd demeanour, he's nevertheless tapping into that mindset, Geraldine, and that's why it's very misleading just to dismiss Trump as just a one-off. He's clearly resonating with a significant segment of Americans, just like, I would argue, Bernie Sanders on the left resonated with a lot of Americans who were sick and tired of Wall Street and Washington.
Oh, look, I think that, in fact, it's the closest to a revolution that America will have.
Well, Bernie was talking about a revolution, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was. I mean, it's a very harsh form of capitalism, the American form of capitalism, where, you know, I always say they call losers who we call the battlers, and I think there's far more dignity in being a battler than a loser. And I actually think it's sort of almost like that's the sort of the pivot point between the two different versions of democracy. So I've wondered for a long time when the people who were really doing it super tough, who believed in the log cabin to presidency mantra, which hasn't been true for so many years, would revolt. And they are revolting now. But whether, you know, the people who are flocking there, who still see hope in America, you know, the Californias, as I said, the Sunbelt areas, the younger, the Latinos, the young African Americans who see potential, like they also represent the entrepreneurial future of America. And so to be full of fears, because he keeps saying, you know, I watched the debate yesterday, he keeps saying, we're in serious trouble. It's just worry, worry, worry.
Yeah.
There are. God, we live in a world, don't we know it? But to properly lead your country, you have to present both sides of the ledger, don't you?
I know, but the losers of globalisation, the folks who are disoriented by radical socio-economic change, they feel that there's no one on either side of politics, Republican or Democrat, who speaks to their hopes and dreams and their fears and anxieties. Trump, again, for all his flaws, has managed to connect with those folks.
He has. But I think if he's, I think myself that I hope people learn that in America, that you can't go back to business as usual with them being ignored. But whether you have to have a person who's so, I mean, we've also seen his debauchery, quite frankly.
Oh, indeed. But Geraldine, to be frank, though, I mean, the Europeans have a more extravagant welfare state than the Americans, and we're also seeing the rise of many right-wing, nativist, nationalist populations there.
Now, I just should say I think we've got, for a little while longer, we're taking your questions on the American election, and Tom and I will do our best to answer them or comment. We have got Neil asking, what are the chances, do you think, you've alluded to this, what really are the chances of a Democrat Senate, do you think, Tom?
I think the Democrat Senate is pretty much a safe bet. The question is, will the Democrats get those 30 votes in the House of Representatives? I mean...
So you think the Democrat Senate is a safe bet?
I think so, yeah.
Really?
It's only 4 to 5 seats to get a majority.
Right.
And I think, I'd have to think at the top of my head, but there are far more Republicans up for re-election in very marginal swing states. So that's why they're more likely to lose than the Democrats. And the other point to bear in mind is that many of these Republicans running for re-election are Republicans who don't like Donald Trump. And they've had a very difficult situation where they have to support their candidate, but they don't really want to. And the other thing to bear in mind is that there now is, in some states, a real anti-Trump swing going on. And if you, as a candidate for Senate, is seen in any way, shape or form sympathetic to Trump, then you'll get smashed.
Now, we've got a final question. Clinton says, not Hillary, a Facebook commenter says, Clinton says, so what? We don't vote. What's the obsession? I think what she's saying is, why do you think Australians are so captivated by this election?
Well, you know, Thomas Jefferson once said, everyone has two favourite countries, their own and France. And I think today you could say everyone has two favourite countries, their own and America. It's true. I mean, we cover America a lot. I think, for what it's worth, and call me a hypocrite, but I think we at Radio National, the ABC, the Australian media cover American politics more than we really should. And we don't do enough on East Asia. I mean, for example, the big story this week, I think, has been the leader of the Philippines going to Beijing and basically saying he doesn't want to be a close ally of the United States anymore. I mean, that's extraordinary. That is a huge geopolitical story, but that's hardly got any traction in the Australian media because we're talking about Donald Trump.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why I cover it I'm very sparing because I think it's over coverage, and I've thought
and we can be guilty of this too ourselves.
Oh
can't
yeah,
we?
we can absolutely. But I suppose it's been personality driven. It has been like a sort of massive reality show, and frankly, I think everybody's going to go to sort of post addiction, letdown when it's
what
all
on earth
over.
will we do?
But look, thanks indeed for all your questions on the US election. We really appreciate it. Now, Tom, but tell us more about Between the Lines. What time are you on?
We're on Thursday nights at 7:30, and then we replayed on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. But of course, the problem with doing something on American politics for a Thursday night episode, if you're going to have it replayed on on Sunday morning, a lot can happen in the meantime. Sure. And we found that out recently when the Washington Post broke that story. So it's good to be on the pace in this business.
Yes. So that's Tom, and I'm on Saturday Extra on Saturday mornings, and I cover a lot of international affairs. And I hope you can join us, and you can watch us and listen to us rather on the ABC Radio app. Go to our ABC Radio National website. Thanks for your time. Bye bye for now.